You're listening to the Two Tongues Podcast. And now your hosts, Kyle and Chris.
Welcome back, one and all, to another episode of the Two Tongues Podcast, where I have a treat for you today. The gnosis-bringer himself, Neal Sendlak of the Gnostic Informant. How are you, buddy?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Listen, I'm really grateful, man. I was chatting with you for a few minutes before we got going, just saying that I've been following your work for a while. And just kind of to get this out of the way, it's been inspiring to me. When I started doing this show, it was really centered around having a sort of religious mystical experience of my own and having an interest in religion and kind of connecting the dots between this experience I had and all the things I've learned about religion. And I've always had a pull towards the primary sources, always sort of thinking that the more ancient wisdom was the best. And then I stumble upon your show, and it's like, you know, all these ancient Greek primary sources, and you're just weaving these tales, and it was just very inspiring to me, man. It's
Thank you.
Yeah. Just to give you a little pat on the back. I love it. I do enjoy the interviews you do with scholars and the kind of critical scholarship. But not as much as the documentaries, man. I really love the YouTube documentaries.
And those are coming back too. I have a lot coming down the pipeline with those documentaries. So just, yeah, because it's been a little bit of a break on those. I must admit, but trust me, they are coming back.
Good. Yeah. And, in particular, the episodes that you did on Dionysus, and of course, all the stuff that you did about, Judaism and the age of the Torah and the age of Moses and all of that, just fascinating stuff. So if anybody hasn't listened to that, by all means, check out Gnostic Informant.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot.
Okay, so without further ado, I want to jump in. If I have learned anything from Christopher Nolan, who's my favorite director, everyone loves a good origin story. So yeah. That's what I want to begin with. I guess what I really want to ask you, Neal, is what got you interested in religion. And it seems to me like it comes from a couple of sources. Either you're indoctrinated into it when you're young and you take it as sort of fundamental and you never question it and it becomes an important part of your life, or you're interested in something peripheral to it, like ancient history, which was my situation. So I'm really curious kind of what got you on this path.
Yeah, I've always had an inclination towards ancient history. I grew up Catholic, but that was never a fundamentalist thing that my family ever did. We would go to church twice a year, if that, sometimes even skipping Christmas or Easter and just not going. Like, that's how not fundamentalist we were. But we were Catholic, and I did get my confirmation and baptism and did the whole nine. But as my life progressed, I started hanging around with the wrong crowds when I was in high school and after high school. And in my late teens and early 20s, wound up in prison, actually. And non-violent, nothing. It was all just mostly possession of
sure.
This is just the Oxycontin era. And this was a bad time. All right. But anyways, I'm not going to get into too details because I don't want to demonetize your show. But 20 years old in prison, turned 21 in prison. Actually, my 21st birthday was in New York State facility in Orleans State Prison. And as I was in there, I read the Bible cover to cover because I was in a really dark place. I was really at rock bottom. And Christianity really, really speaks to people in those places. So probably a lot of people who watch this could identify. When you're at rock bottom and you're reading the parables of Jesus, and you're hearing and you're reading, this is a man who came down as God, who lowered himself to the lowest, and then didn't care about the highest echelons of society. He didn't come to speak to Augustus. He didn't come to speak with the Pharisees and the high priest. He came to the lowest fisherman. He came and on the cross, he saves one of the murderers who didn't have any reason to be saved at all. And then he tells parables about the the prodigal son who goes and wastes his inheritance away, and he's all screwed up, and he comes back, and the father throws a big party for him. And the other brother, the good brother, is like, how come I never got a party? I never even left. I've been here. I've been your right-hand man running the show, running the farm the whole time, and I never got a party. This dude runs off, spends all his money on prostitutes and screws his whole life up. And then he comes back, and we're throwing a party for that. And that was that message that the lowest are the most raised highest was so powerful that it made me want to become a Christian. It made me feel redeemed. It worked. I was actually saved through Christianity in prison. Joined a church, got baptized again. And but this time I wanted to try the evangelical Baptist what would you say, Protestant route, because that was who came to the prisons. There wasn't, I think there was actually a Catholic service in the prison I went to, but no one went to it. So I wanted to go to the ones everyone else was going to.
Sure.
So I went to the Protestant one. And so I started becoming a Protestant, and I started going even when I got out for years, for like 6 years after that. Every day, every day, twice a week. I mean, I said every day, as in every day there was a service. I was there. And I even got to the point where the church gave me my own key and says, if you're here early, you can open up the doors. Like, you are like one of the highest up in this church. I became a big part of my church. And that's how I got into podcasting as well. Because the pastor at the church I wanted to record. He wanted to do 2 recordings every week. He wanted to do a recording podcast where he would have on guests, and he would like invite different pastors from the city. Sometimes he'd invite politicians, MAGA politicians would come in, and he got some pretty big guests. He got I'm trying to think of the guy's name. Oh man, this was a big name. There was one of Trump's I can't remember. Roger Stone. I don't know why I can remember his name. Roger Stone. I met Roger Stone. He came in and did the podcast. Yeah, in the studio. I was the one who recorded the podcast. I was the one who adjusted his microphone. Big. It was crazy. So I became part of that world. And what was it called? I forgot what I was going to say. Let me back up a little bit. Before I even got to that place, though, when I was in prison, I read the Bible cover to cover, every single book. And I had a Catholic Bible, by the way.
So you had Esdras and Tobit and all those extra books.
So I had all the extra books.
Yeah.
So that kind of did something to me, where I was interested in because when I got out, I remember going to church and being like, where's Sirach? It's one of my favorite books. They're like, Sirach? That's not a Bible book. That's Apocrypha. And I was like, oh, okay. So anyways, I was reading the Bible cover to cover, everything. The Wisdom of Solomon. I love that text. It's got the Logos and Sophia. It has a little Gnostic bent going on in there. And so I became obsessed with the Bible, but not just the Bible. When I was done reading the Bible, because I was in there for over a year and a half, about a year and a half. I was in there for about 16 months. That was my minimum. My bid was it's called a 1 and 1/3 to 4 years.
Wow.
So you do 1 and 1 1/3 of a year, which is 16 months. And if you didn't know trouble, you get out and you go on parole, which I did. I got into fights, but they never wrote me up. It was always just get off of them. Like, I was good enough to get out on my minimum. Which is very hard to do in prison, dude, by the way. I'm actually proud of that. But I stayed out of the gangs. I hung out with the gangs and all that, the woods and all that. Of course, you have to. But I didn't really get into the politics, and I didn't really, I stayed away from the trouble. Got out. But also, while I was in there, okay, that's what I meant to say. Not just reading the Bible. After I finished the Bible, I would go to the library this prison had a really nice state-of-the-art library for some reason.
Nice.
And they had a baseball diamond. Like, we had the baseball bat chained to the ground. We were playing baseball or softball, I should say. Crazy. I don't know. I guess I got into a nice medium prison. Anyways, long story short, I read a lot of literature. I read Jordan Peterson's Maps of Meaning in there.
Hell yeah.
Before anyone even knew who he was back then. I don't know how I actually, that book got sent into me. That wasn't in the library. That book got sent into me. But I also had a big affinity towards other religious texts, even though I knew at the time I was like, Christianity is the king of them all, but I still want to read them. So I was reading Bhagavad Gita. I was reading the Dhammapada, Upanishads.
Yeah.
I was reading the Rig Veda, Samaveda. I was reading the Tao Te Ching. I was reading Greek mythology if I can get my hands on it. I was trying to find who Greek philosophers. What else was out there? Persian mythology. The
Avesta,
Gathas, the Avesta, all that stuff. I got everything I can get my hands on. I would go to the librarian and I would say, "Where's the ancient religion section?" He'd point to me, and it was all in one big section. It was so easy to find it all. So every week, I remember it was on Wednesdays. You'd go to the library on Wednesdays. Every Wednesday, I would write my name on the list, and we'd go to the library, and I would go straight to that section. And that whole week, I was just reading whatever new book I got. So, I mean, even like Native American mythology, just whatever, Norse mythology, all that. All the pagan sagas with Odin and the sons of Ragnar, everything. I was just like obsessed with ancient mythology, and that's it. When I got out, I had this big knowledge base of ancient mythologies, and I started collecting all you see behind me. These are all my collections over the years, all used books that I get. They're on Amazon. I remember one time I went to a library when I was living in Buffalo, and the library was throwing away old books that they were, because they're updating the library, which is what libraries do on a regular basis. And there's like, these books are like 20 years old. We're going to throw them out. Anyone can just take them for free. And there was like 50 ancient history textbooks, like academic style textbooks on ancient history. I got Peter Green's book for free. Where is it? Peter Green's. It's one of the most like, it's like one of the most go-to ancient history books on the Hellenistic period. It's called Alexander to Actium. Got that for free.
Nice.
So anyways, that's how I got acquainted with academia, with ancient mythology, and how I got started out. And then years later, as I started to study all these books, I started to realize that scholars were not saying what my pastor's saying. They're saying very different things. They are almost saying opposite things. And I wanted to know which one was true. The first, and I should say real quick, the first brick in the wall was the church that I was going to was called the King James Only Church. And they claim that the King James Bible was perfect. It had the perfect translation from the original Greek and the original Hebrew of the Old Testament, and that the other Bibles were all taking verses out. And they would prove this by showing me that the King James has more verses, therefore it has all the verses that were there. And then I looked into the scholarship, and the scholarship says, no, those are all added verses from the later Latin Bibles. And then the Bibles like the NIV that take verses out are actually taking out the new verses that were added later, and they're going back to the original Greek. So then I had to test that out. How do I test that out? Well, sure enough, there's websites you can go to where you can actually look at the physical manuscripts and look at them for yourself, and you can see it. So I started learning a little bit of Greek, started learning a little bit of Hebrew, just enough learn the alphabet so I can actually slosh my way through and check and go, oh, okay, yeah, it doesn't say what this King James Bible says. That verse is not there. It's actually skipped right to the next part. And I can see the physical piece of manuscript with my own eyes and actually do the testing. And that's how I got into the whole methodology mindset, where you can actually like test out theories and say, does this hold water? So I started becoming more academic minded. And then as soon as I left the church, like literally the month I left the church, I started Gnostic Informant. And at that time, I was still Christian brained in a lot of ways. I thought the Gnostics were the original Christians. I actually still do think that.
I kind of do too.
even though I don't believe in Christianity, I still think that when you look at the earliest wave of Christianity, I think there was a Marcionite, Valentinian, Carpocratian, Basilidean bent going on that didn't become heresy until around 150 AD, when Justin Martyr started saying, no, we got to start doing this. We got to start doing this. So,
yeah, that's interesting. So I wanted to ask you, so while you're in that sort of deeply religious phase of your life, you're attending that church, and you're still reading everything you can find on religions outside of Christianity. What was it you were seeking, do you think? Because clearly everything you were looking for wasn't contained in the Bible, or you wouldn't have been exploring outside of it. So is there anything you can put your finger on?
I wanted to know like, okay, we had this clear-cut story known as the Gospels about what these people in this part of the world think about God and what happened and what is the divine. I wanted to know, what do these other cultures, what does China think? Did China ever have a God come as a human form? What do they think? And that's kind of why I was out reading those other texts. I was looking to see, is any of these other cultures stack up to the greatness of that Christianity is, and I read the Quran as well, and wasn't very impressed, not gonna lie.
Yeah, that's sort of been my my take on the Quran as well. Like a bunch of rehashed stories from the Old and New Testament that Muhammad seems to have only partially understood, along with a bunch of questionable passages, violent passages. So I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean, it reads like it could be like in the Psalms. Maybe there could be like you can probably take some of what's in the Quran and make like new Psalms of them, and but it's not like it doesn't really work as a replacement for what the Christian Bible already has. And I think that was that was Islam's big mistake. Islam's big mistake was trying to replace what Christianity had as far as scripture. Because if Islam wanted to try and do more like a Mormon thing and add a third book, and then if they had their ways of like not trying to contradict but actually go along, and maybe even like rewrite, for example, maybe they can fix Genesis when Isaac and Ishmael, and make Ishmael the real, because that's their claim. Their big claim is Ishmael was the real firstborn, blah 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 blah. And they could have had their own like version of that or something. I don't know, but they just wrote the Quran, and they just it leaves it all up for you to go and look at the Old Testament and New Testament yourself. And when they mention the apostles, and they mention Peter, and they mention Mary, your only reference to that is from the Gospels. So you have to go through Christianity. So Islam has a big problem there. Yeah.
No, totally. I don't want to get sidetracked on Islam, because I'm not as steeped in it. Although I do have an episode teed up, I'm going to eventually roll out. So here's the next question for you, Neal. What were the seminal moments that pulled you away from Christianity? Like, what were the discoveries? What were the moments that sort of broke that down for you?
Yeah. I first started to, when I started running into, it's actually interesting. I started running into mythicists who would throw out a challenge. Can you show me any physical evidence of Jesus at all? And I remember being like, oh, this will be easy to do. Of course, there's probably some record somewhere, some Roman inscription somewhere. And I remember thinking, oh, the Pontius Pilate stone, that's got to be it. And it's like, actually, that doesn't mention Jesus or anything related to the Gospels. And it's like, and then you start to realize, wait a minute, the evidence is really bad. Not only is it bad, you have contemporary authors that lived 20 years before Jesus and all the way 20 years after, meaning Philo is the one I'm thinking of right now. Philo lived from 20 BC to around 50 AD. So his whole life overlaps the life of Jesus. And this guy writes volumes and volumes and volumes of books and books and books and books about in Greek about Israel, about Judaism, about the temple. He mentions Pontius Pilate. He mentions Herod. He mentions all the surrounding political affairs that are going on in the 30s and 40s AD. And he even has a theology that is almost identical to Christian theology, especially Johannine theology with the Logos and the Triad. But he never mentions anyone named Jesus. Even if he didn't believe in Jesus, he never says, oh, there was a guy whose name was Jesus, and everyone thinks he's the Logos incarnate. Everyone thinks he's this Messiah that we've been waiting for, but I just don't believe, like, nothing. And that made me go, wait a minute. If this intelligent, brilliant author, illustrious author of this period has no mention, this is not just an argument from silence, because you can say that's an argument from silence. It doesn't prove Jesus didn't exist. I would say I agree with that. It doesn't prove Jesus didn't exist, but what it does highlight is that what is written about him in the Gospels didn't happen. Because if that did happen, if these things did happen, like there was these miracles and 5,000 people witnessed miracles and 5,000 people witnessed a resurrection, and this is not spreading to Philo by 20 years later, by 50 AD, when he's already writing about Caligula and he's already writing about way later events about in that period of time, and Augustus is long dead and Tiberius is long dead, and he's all the way in the Caligula era now, and he has no knowledge of anyone doing this stuff at all.
Curious. Yeah.
That makes me think, okay, either this was a really small time dude who didn't do much, and then his story progressed into what we get into the Gospels in the after 70 AD. I think all the Gospels are post 70 AD. Or he didn't exist at all. One or the other. Either he was just some small time walking around doing a bunch of shit and got killed, and then his followers were like obsessed with them, and then like that kind of festered and then bubbled up into what it is. That's very likely. That's what I would go with. But there's a good possibility he didn't exist at all. That got me really down the direction of rejecting Christianity.
Yeah. Interesting. What about Josephus?
And Josephus, so a lot of people point to Josephus as like an early attestation of Jesus. He's actually not. He writes about him in 96. This is way after the Gospels are already in circulation. This is after by this time, there's already bishops in the church. So he's just writing about what everyone else is writing about. So I'm not, when these mythicists try to fight against Josephus, I'm like, why? He wrote in 96. He probably did mention Jesus. Why wouldn't he? What makes you think he couldn't have wrote about Jesus if we know we have a church by 96 AD? We know we have Clement of Rome writing in that same year. He writes his epistle in 96 AD. So yeah, and that's the first time anyone mentions Jesus outside of the Bible. By the way, Paul's letters. Nina Livesey I read her book. I read her whole book recently, and it's shocking that she really does. She's a Pauline scholar, first of all. This is a scholar who wrote her thesis on Pauline literature, who knows all the history of Pauline literature. And in her book, she goes through the Pauline literature history and she kind of flexes her muscles about how much she knows about Pauline literature and the history of Pauline scholarship. So when I see these like outside Dead Sea Scrolls one-off scholars laughing at her for her thesis without reading her book, they look stupid, because this person is like, this is what she does. She studies Pauline literature. And her conclusion of her lifetime's work is that Paul's letters are forged and they were written in the 2nd century. So they're backdating, which was normal. This is what Judaism does. Daniel's backdated. Isaiah's backdated. All the prophets are backdated. Genesis is obviously backdated. All the scriptures are backdated. They were not written in the times where they claim to be written by the authors they claim to be written by. Right. I mean, honestly, almost every single book in the Bible has a name of an author who didn't write it, and it's backdated. So why should we think Paul is something different?
That's a good point.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's
you know,
another thing. If that's true, if she's right, if like let's just play this tape through and use her as an axiom and just say, for some reason we just know she's right. Then that's game over for Christianity. Now you have nothing before 70, before the fall of the temple, and that could explain what Christianity even is at that point. Because think about it. Christianity, if all Christian scripture is written post 70 AD, then what Christianity is a replacement for temple Judaism.
interesting.
It's a globalist mindset of Judaism using Greek because everyone speaks Greek. And Jesus is a place-in for the temple, which is in the Gospel of Hebrews. And that's even Philo's idea. Philo had an idea in his writings, all over his writings, that there should be the word of God can replace the temple. We don't need a temple. We have the word of God. And so all of a sudden, if there's no scripture at all before 70 AD, and all of a sudden after 70 AD, we start getting Christian text, that explains, and that might point to something, that the whole thing was just a cope the whole time. Just a cope for the temple falling. What do we do now? Start a new religion.
That's a fascinating idea, especially when you consider that the Pharisee school and that became rabbinic Judaism. The sort of phrase is that they got their, I don't know what they call it, like prayer, to replace the temple, so that whatever they were doing at the temple, when the temple was the center of Judaism, they couldn't do anymore. So they had to have a replacement. They had to create a replacement for the temple service and all of the rituals surrounding the temple, because it didn't exist. So that falls right in place and in time. And it's actually a more fascinating answer than the one I was going to propose to you, which I was just remembering when you had Simka Yakubovich on from the Naked Archaeologist.
Oh yeah, that was a good one. Yeah,
I love that guy's stuff. But when you had him, so he did this documentary where he was talking about these three individuals. I think it was in maybe it was 100 years or less prior to the time of Jesus, and they were in three different cities, and they were similar characters. They were like Bar Kokhba type characters that had messianic followings, and people believed that they could possibly be the Messiah. And anyway, I just wondered if a character like Jesus is not an amalgamation of people like that existed not only before the first century, but after, when we consider people like Bar Kokhba, all in that same time period.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring up Bar Kokhba, because what's so fascinating about that is Daniel and Jeremiah stop. Daniel and Jeremiah proposed the 70 years theory, that the temple will be destroyed and in 70 years it'll be rebuilt. Why? Because that's what happened when they went to Babylon. When in 586 BCE they got destroyed. 70 years later, in 516, Cyrus lets them go back to Babylon, or lets them go back to Israel. 70 years, the Messiah comes, Cyrus, the Messiah comes, and they lets him come back. And it's weird because 70 has this weird connection to David, who's also the Messiah. David was 70 years when he died. Interesting, 70 years when he died. Almost like, and his son builds the temple. So he's part of the temple. He's connected to the temple in that he starts the temple, his son finishes it. He's at age 30, he becomes king. And at age 40, he rules all over Israel. So you have an age 30, Jesus starts his ministry at age 30.
Oh.
And then 40 years between 30 and 70 AD is how long it takes for the temple to be destroyed. 70 temples destroyed. Same with Cyrus. Cyrus sends the Davidic line. Zerubbabel is from David's line, who gets funded by Cyrus, the Messiah, to go and rebuild the temple after 70 years. So go back to Bar Kokhba. The temple, it's already odd enough that Jesus is technically born 70 years before the temple is destroyed. That's weird enough in itself. Makes me kind of think of some sort of like the mythicism type thoughts.
Sure.
But whatever, that could be, the fact that he's born under Herod means the dates fall off. But so there's a whole lot of nuance to talk about there. But let's forget about that for a second. Bar Kokhba, when was Bar Kokhba? 135 AD. Exactly 65 years after the temple. It almost looks like that the Bar Kokhba revolt was because of Daniel, because these Jews were like, we're almost at the year 70.
Oh,
We need to start fighting now to get our temple back, because by the year 140, God will give us our temple back, but we need to fight for it. That's what I'm thinking happened, because the timing is just so perfect that they would start to rebel right around that 5-year period, right before that because Daniel has this 3.5-year week thing. So there might be right before that 3.5-year week, they start thinking about they're getting their temple back. So I think Bar Kokhba is it's a turning point for Christian theology, because right after that is when you start getting loads and loads of Christian sources. At that time, Christianity becomes it's like on the map all of a sudden. Like this is the time where Celsus starts writing about it. You start getting Justin Martyr. You start getting the battle between the Gnostics and the so-called proto-orthodoxy, all around that 130 period. 135 period. That's the year. 135 is the year Valentinus was in Rome, running to be bishop of Rome.
right.
It's right around the time of Marcion. It's a huge decade for early Christianity, and it just happens to be right at that time of Bar Kokhba. It makes me think like something was, I don't know, some sort of turning point was happening in religion for Jews.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's so many references to that where in ancient cultures, like anniversaries were auspicious, and they recognize the patterns. And this goes to astrology and all sorts of other things. But to think that they would, encourage the Bar Kokhba revolt because it was an auspicious time. That's interesting. That's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
All right, Neal, I want to ask you a couple of Socratic questions. And what I mean by Socratic questions is easy questions, simple questions that are far harder to answer because they're simple, if that makes any sense. Because I was saying to you when we first started here that I sort of got this impression that, Neal is this guy who's as fascinated with the idea of God and religion as I am, but spend a lot of time talking about these mythicist ideas and maybe poo-pooing historical Christianity and talking to folks like Bart Ehrman and so I believed until we started talking that you were maybe an atheist, and you corrected me on that, and so I think we're going to have some interesting conversations there. But this is kind of what I mean. The first Socratic question I had for you is, if given all the things you've learned and studied over the last 5 years or so, what is your stance on the reality of spirit or the divine?
I do believe that people are inspired by something greater outside that is unseen. And the Greeks called it the muse. And the poets and the philosophers and the writers and the historians and the musicians and the artists and the sculptors and the painters and the architects, they believe that there was some guiding spirit that was inspiring these art forms, whether it be writing or whatever, or music or art or plays or playwriters, tragedy, comedy, all that. The Greeks believed that there was some sort of spirit. They called it the muse, and they had 9 of them for different areas. And the 9 muses were ruled by 3 gods: Dionysus, Aphrodite, and Apollo. And the 3 end up going back to the one. And at some point, there's a hierarchy. So this is inspiration. And by the way, the Greeks, going back to the Bronze Age, not just the Greeks actually, just Bronze Age cultures in general, had this idea that when you have a feeling in general, whether you feel lust, Aphrodite is inspiring you. When you feel drunk, the grapevine god is inspiring you. When you feel angry that you want to go to war, Mars or Ares is inspiring you. That was how Bronze Age, early Iron Age people thought. You see this in Homer. Homer Homer, whenever somebody has an inclination to do something, it's not because of their own genius that got them to think. Even, by the way, even the word genius comes from ancient Roman, where there's a spirit called the genius that is with it guiding you, like a daimon. The Greeks called it daimon.
Yeah.
That becomes, now we have our own genius. Now I'm a genius. They would never say that in the ancient Bronze Age. The gods are in control of everything. We are spirits locked in a body. And the gods are basically guiding us to do whatever their wills are. And so, like, you have an inclination to go hunting. Well, Adonis really woke me up today and made me want to go hunting. That's what they would say. And this, you can see when you read Homer, this becomes very apparent. In the Homeric age, the gods are in control of us. They're the ones commanding us to do things. We're just kind of walking through and being guided by these gods. I believe there's something true to this. I believe that we do have some inclination, some inspiring factor. Now, the names of the gods, different cultures have different names, but that those emotions and those feelings are all universal. And Plato might call them the forms, and
Yes.
Jung would call them the archetypes or whatever.
Yeah.
But I do think there's some truth to whatever they're getting at when we talk about that subject, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah. Jordan Peterson, you brought him up, and I'm a big fan of Maps of Meaning. He would call them transpersonal forces. And I don't know, Neal, if you've read this book, The Eternal Drama by Ed Edinger. He's one of Jung's pupils. And it says exactly what you just painted. It tells exactly that story. And what really sent it home for me was what he was talking, because he has a section on the gods and a section on the goddesses, and he's talking about the Zeus personality, or the Apollo personality, or the Hermes personality, and he talks about the Hestia personality. And when he did, it just really clicked for me, man. He was talking about the hearth, right, and the fireplace, and the place where people congregate. You know, you're sitting around the campfire. I mean, I did some hunting growing up, and when my grandfather would visit, we'd always sit around and tell stories. And this is the kind of thing we human beings have been doing from time immemorial. And when you're sitting around doing the cooking, or when you're sitting around in the campfire and you're telling the stories, you have a feeling, you have a spirit of family, you have a spirit of something that you feel that you don't normally feel. But when you're in that situation, it's evoked in you. I don't know if you can relate to that, but that's the spirit of Hestia, you know?
Absolutely. And I think that was the purpose of the sacrifice and the worship of the having idols and having images and having the gods in front of you, and doing an offering, doing a ritual, lighting a fire, lighting a candle. It was you trying to bring your will into something. You were trying to make a pact. You're trying. So think about it like this. You want to win that football game on Sunday. You could practice all week and do your best, but imagine if you really sat down on Monday night, and you turned the lights down, and you dimmed a candle in front of an image. And that image was the image that you are trying to attune yourself with. All of a sudden, you're locked in. Your mind is locked in. And now there might even be something naturalistic to this. It might not be magic. It might not be that there's something, spiritual happening. There might be a natural thing happening that you have just attuned yourself, and you cause yourself to have this will. And to go, this is what they do before battle. They would offer a sacrifice to Mars, and they would do whatever their ritual was. And the people would kind of get into a little bit of a frenzy, and they would get all riled up, and they were ready to, and it would help them win that war. It would give them that little bit of an edge over their opponent. And by the way, Homer deals with, early on in Homer's Iliad, you run into the problem of two people praying to the same gods at the same time for the same thing. What do the gods do? I'm praying to Ares and Apollo and Aphrodite and Zeus, and I need these gods to help me because the Trojans and blah 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 blah. And the Trojans are also going, God, Apollo, Aphrodite, Zeus, we need you. And the gods are going, we're in a pickle now. And it's funny because the Greeks you can see the Greeks are thinking about these problems. What happens when two people pray at the same time? Then what do we do? and the gods have to decide. The gods have to debate. The gods have to think of what is the just way? How do we bring order to this? Like that type of thing. And it reminds people that you might pray for something, you're not going to get it. There might be some other higher will that's going to surpass your will. You just can't see it. And I thought that, and it's just brilliant. And this is going back. This is like Bronze Age theology that so many people think was primitive, but I just don't see it that way. I think
sophisticated.
It was very sophisticated.
So in your mind, there's reality to these sort of psychic powers. I don't know if that's kind of a woo-woo way of saying it, but these qualities of psyche that are kind of universal in human beings. And I agree with you. I want to ask you, because in the realm of psyche, we're talking about something that's non-physical, right? It has to do with mind and not matter. And this is how we think about spirit and soul and the divine and in general. I read this book called Conscious Mind. It's by a philosopher named David Chalmers. It's kind of a famous book in the philosophy of mind. And in this book, he says something that kind of blew my mind. And this is connected to that mystical experience I had, and we can get into it. But it's the idea that consciousness itself is a sacred thing. It's something like what we mean when we say spirit. Chalmers doesn't say that, but what he does say is consciousness does not supervene on the physical. And what he means by that is there's nothing about the laws of physics that could predict or explain consciousness. So
isn't that interesting?
Yes, it's something numinous. It's something non-physical. It doesn't depend on the physical, and yet it exists. And we can't deny that it exists because it's within us right now. It's the only thing that we can be certain of is our own awareness, So I wonder what you think about that.
No, it's a fascinating point, because when we talk about things that are supernatural or metaphysics, we're talking about beyond physical, but we can know that these things exist. I mean, now what is knowledge? You can say a computer has knowledge in it. We store data in there, but no, it's just a piece of plastic and metal that's wired in a way that you can power it up and you can see a bunch of lights and numbers, and that's not. Knowledge is something metaphysical. It's something that we agree on. Like, we all think it's there. It's not really there, but it's there. Do we have knowledge bases? And that's a metaphysical reality. Things like consciousness, though, is also things that we can't see or touch, but we can agree that we're conscious right now. So that's like the basics of like what things in metaphysics that exist. And I mean, yeah, like you said, these are things you can't necessarily measure. I mean, you can kind of measure consciousness. You could do like aptitude tests and see how you can measure how conscious people actually are, like whatever that means. But you can't really measure what it is. You can't touch it. You can't put it on a you can't like
put it on a
petri dish or something. Exactly. So there we go. Then we have a starting point to what people mean when we talk about metaphysics. There are things in metaphysics that exist.
Yeah, this was the thing that kind of blew my mind, is just sort of coming to this conclusion that there is an element, there is a component to reality that is non-physical. And when I was reading Jung, which I absolutely love Jung, and I was hoping to ask you some questions about that as well, he talks about the unconscious. And that in a way that's very mystical. And Jung was a mystical guy. It's so interesting. But he talks about the unconscious as like, we're going to go deep if I start talking about Jung. But he talks about this idea, and Jordan Peterson too, he talks about this sort of symbol, the Ouroboros, this ancient Egyptian symbol of the Ouroboros, the snake swallowing its tail. Mm-hmm. And it's the thing that's self-created, and it's the union of opposites. Yeah. So you've got this component to reality that's conscious, and that's the part we're all familiar with, the part that you associate with matter and experience. And then there's this other part, this other half of it that we don't experience, and it's deeper even than the conscious part. So you've got this, consciousness itself, the non-physical stuff. You've got this idea of the unconscious, and then you can start tiptoeing into quantum physics and things that I don't understand it well, but I love to do. And you start talking about the observer effect and how consciousness collapses the wave function, and you talk about things.
There's some wild stuff out there. There's some wild stuff out there. And yeah, Jung has that book, I think it's called like On Dreams or something like that. I think it's
Yes.
where you're right. He's obsessed with that Ouroboros thing because there was like a chemist that like had a dream of that image or something, and then he invented some. Hang on, let me just see what it is. Chemist Ouroboros. Oh yeah, so Jung writes about this August Kukli was a German organic chemist. He let me see. Where's the Ouroboros thing? I guess he had a dream where he saw a snake eating its own tail, and he became. I'm trying to find the exact story right here. He invented some field of chemistry because of this.
Really?
Yeah, so Kukli was one of the proponents, chemists in Europe, especially the field of theoretical chemistry. He was the principal founder of the theory of chemical structure, and in particular, the Kukli structure. That's what it's called. And so he had a dream of a snake eating its own tail, and then he produced what in modern physics, this idea of like the double ring and the structure of what's called the benzene ring in chemistry. And this is still held up today in science. So Jung was very fascinated by dreams because of this.
Yeah.
Carl Jung believed that when we're in our dream state, we're tapping into some sort of deep unconscious realm, some sort of like big giant infinite pool of the archetypes, and then like there are forces that can kind of lead us and bring us ideas to bring into the world. So a metaphysical becomes reality through dream. And Jung, in this same book, I'm trying to find out here. Let me find out the exact name of the book. I read this book in jail, by the way. Jung on dream. This is one of my first books that I ever read.
I have a copy of it somewhere.
Yeah, it's called. That's not it.
There's
the Man and His Symbols. That's what it's called.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a book called Man and His Symbols. And it's this book he goes into, first of all, he goes into symbolism. And the Ouroboros is in there. He mentions exactly what I just said in there. So he has goes into all the symbolism in ancient Greek and Hermes and what is the Hermes symbolism and the caduceus and all that. He goes really deep into symbolism. By the way, Jung was a great biblical scholar. I don't know if you ever read his stuff on Ion. He knows. I learned more about early Christianity from Jung than I do from Bible scholars. He was a beast. He knew about the Gnostics. This is where I got into Gnosticism, from him.
Really? I thought it was Litwa that got you into the Gnostic.
Oh no, way before Litwa. Litwa was just someone who I can finally talk to who knew about this stuff as a scholar today. But I was already, and I shouldn't say Litwa didn't teach me anything. Litwa taught me a lot. Learned a lot from Litwa. But I'm just saying, I was already like, I already knew about all the different groups and stuff from Carl Jung, from reading through like Ion. There's a book called Ion from Carl Jung, where he goes into the Gnostics, the Carpocratians, the all this stuff that Litwa writes about, Jung was already writing about.
Really? I got to get that one, man.
Yeah. And there's another.
Did you read Answers to Job?
No.
I bought a copy because I was told that was amazing. It's a small little Jung book. It's called Answers to Job, but I haven't read it yet, so that's why I asked.
Okay. Yeah, I have a lot of Jung books here, but on that one I don't have. But anyways, to go back to his Man and Symbols, he eventually starts talking about dreams, and he's very scientific in his approach. He's not just kind of just going off of just like theoretical nonsense. He says he starts documenting his patients that he dealt with as a psychotherapist. And he said a lot of times these psychotherapist patients would tell him his dreams, this is part of the work, and they would come true. He talks about there was a patient that he had who kept telling Jung about he was having dreams that he would fall off a cliff and die. And then sure enough, this guy went hiking and fell off a cliff and died. Yeah. And then he talks about another person who had a dream that's something about something. And then there was something that happened in his life that reflected the reality that was in the dream. And he goes through different cases of like, and he asks the question. He says, could it be that there's something in the dream world that's trying to tell us or trying to, I don't know, warn us? Have you ever had the effect? This happens all the time to me and happens to other people as well, where you're dreaming and when you wake up, you like in your dream, you can see someone running towards you, and then you wake up and then there's someone running towards you. Like your dream just saw it happen right before it. That's a phenomenon that's reported by millions of people all over the world where they will, it's very, very small and subtle, where like you'll have a dream where like the doorbell will ring. And then all of a sudden you wake up and the doorbell rings right away. Like that, this is a thing people write about all the. I've had it happen to me a few times where it's not it's nothing like crazy, but it's a very subtle, quick reflex that happens in dreams right before it happens. And so people have pointed this out. So I forgot what the name of the phenomenon, but Jung was obsessed with this thing.
Interesting. I love Carl Jung and that depth psychology. Another Socratic question for you, Neal. What is God? What do you think God is?
I think we kind of touched on it a little bit. I think it's the divine mind of what we're in, this reality. It's the it's the total mind. It's the nous of all.
Yes.
It's the mind behind what we're in right now. And the question is, are we a part of it or is it outside? Are we separate from it? You know, that's the question of material. What's called material monism, which is we are all part of one thing and we're all in it. We're all like connected through quantum physics or whatever. And then people reject that and say, no, everything's separate from each other. You know, we're not all one. We're all separate. Like that's a big question too.
The one and the many.
Yeah, one and the many. Yeah. And so, yeah, that's what I would say. I would say God is the divine mind and gods are lesser parts of that divine mind, the components of that divine mind.
See, I used to resist this idea, that second part. So the first part of what you just explained, I'm on board, and I've always been on board. This idea of the monad, the cosmos is the monad, and that is the composite of all the physical and all the spiritual. It's all one. But to suggest that the gods or these transpersonal archetypal forces, motivational forces, as Jordan Peterson would say, that these things are, they have an existence in and of themselves. Man, I resisted that. I've always considered myself to be a radical monotheist. And by that, I mean, I can't make room for devils and angels. I can't make room for lesser deities. For me, God is one. And I've always been very reluctant to accept the reality of.
Let me try to challenge you on that. Well, yeah. Why are we not beings, you and I, that we can? So if there's a we already have a hierarchy of beings. We have animals, we have plants, we have, you know, whatever. We have fish, and there seems to be a hierarchy of beings and capabilities and lifespans. What's to say that there's something can't be above our level of plane in existence, something that's more like we would call it daemons or gods, or maybe they have some sort of metaphysical capabilities that we don't have. What rules that out for you?
Nothing other than a stubbornness. And now I'm coming around. Like Jung has opened me up to this, and I'm coming around to the idea. So I'm with you. I'm not resisting it at all. I think it's a possibility. Mm-hmm. But when I was younger and I was more of a naive Christian, I had problems with this idea of the devil. And so the idea that this is like, it's almost like a Zoroastrian idea. This idea that, because as I don't know if you felt this way, but growing up as a Christian, it would not be out of line whatsoever for you to describe the religion as a good God and a bad God, an Ahriman and a Ahura Mazda. That was God and the devil. And so I had this picture of the devil as a distinct, separate, supernatural being of near equal power to God. And I couldn't square that with monotheism. So I just didn't accept the devil at all. And so the idea that angels and demons might be a reality was out of the question. But I am coming around.
Yeah. And what was I going to say? So are you leaning towards, because when you say strict monotheism, is that God in full control of everything?
So this is where it's going to get a little bit loosey goosey, and I'll take responsibility for that. The word God is very difficult to pin down. So when I was young and naive, I would have said that if there is a supernatural power who is creator, that could only be one. And now it's more, my ideas have become more of a monist sort of theology. I told you, I alluded a couple times to having a kind of a what I call mystical experience. I had, just to be frank, and I was going to get to this at some point. I took a heavy dose of MDMA and I had a meditative experience and I became one with the universe. So I had one of those hippy dippy experiences that people talk about.
Yeah, that's
I wanted to ask
part
you.
of my story as well. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm very curious about it. Well, let me just say, the MDMA thing was interesting because I did experiment, and this was all like in a seeking sort of way. I experimented with hallucinogens, LSD and mushrooms and various things, DMT and all this stuff, but I never had any experience that I would consider to be spiritual. But I did, again, I had a big dose of MDMA back in late 2019. I'm sitting on my couch playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and it kicked in, and I just laid down on my couch, pulled the blankets up to my chin, and I just had this intense internal experience. By the way, I've never picked up the remote of a video game ever since. I have no understanding as to why that is, but it is the case.
Really?
Yeah. But the reason I bring up the MDMA thing is because it's not, as I'm sure you probably know, it's not a hallucinogen. It's not something that's going to make you see things. And what it does chemically is something like I can never remember the chemical, oxytocin. When a woman gives birth, she's got a flood of these chemicals that her body produces, her brain produces, that are it's a bonding chemical. Well, this is what MDMA does. It has an effect like that makes you feel connected, right? And I felt connected to everything. And that experience answered all of the questions that I ever had about religion. It was like that was the genesis of me starting this podcast. But having that one with the universe experience, it settled me into this monistic perspective. And I don't really make a distinction between monism and monotheism, or pantheism and panentheism, and all these different words that you hear thrown around. I just feel like we're all circumambulating the same idea.
Yeah, because I would say there's the distinction between the two would be monism allows for polytheism, because theism is just the worship aspect, like you worship one god. Well, I mean that, and to separate that from henotheism, is that you have multiple gods that are on par with each other, and you just decide to worship only Aphrodite. Doesn't mean Aphrodite is the most powerful god. She's just that's who you worship. That's henotheism. Monotheism is there's just one god that you worship, and he's in control of everything. He's the head honcho god. He is the creator of everything. Nothing's above him. Everything's below him. Even if there's angels and demons, it's still below him. They're just different levels of being. Monism doesn't necessarily say that you only worship one god that's on top. Monism says you can be a pagan, but you acknowledge that there is a one. Like the Greeks were monist. The Greek pagans were mostly monist, especially after Plato. Like after Plato, everyone was a monist. It was just the science of the day. Everyone believed that there was, like, even Pliny the Elder, some random author. He's like, he's writing about all the different gods and goddesses. And he's like, yeah, there's a god for this, there's a god for that. But we all know that there's one head honcho on top of it all. Right. And that really highlights the thinking of the time period of Pliny's time in that first century Roman period. But monism doesn't say you just worship that one god. Monism is like, you worship plenty of gods. You give offerings to Aphrodite on Wednesday, or on Friday, I should say. And then Saturday, you give offerings to Saturn. You believe in all the gods, and you believe in the divine hierarchy, but you also believe that there's one major demiurgic creator on top of it all. And that's what separates monism from monotheism, is the worship aspect.
Yeah. So I'll push back a little bit on your definition of henotheism, because this is kind of crucial to my understanding of things. So as I understand it, henotheism was a word that was invented to describe Hinduism by Westerners at some point. I don't know when it was, in the 1800s or something. And they said, look, in this system, you have Brahma, you have this God, this high God, who is manifest in all these other forms. So if you're talking about Lakshmi or Shiva or whoever you're talking about, all of these gods are Brahma. There is only one God, but that God is manifest, or whatever word you want to use. Let's just say manifest in all of these other forms. So in truth, there is only one God.
I would say that would be monist. That would be a monist worldview.
That's my worldview. And I'll take it a step further and say, there's so much about that unitive experience, and I want you to tell me about yours. I'm super interested in that. But with mine, it focused on consciousness so much. I kept saying when I was in that experience that consciousness is the sacred thing. And what I meant by that is whatever it is that's looking out through my eyes, that's God. And so in some very real way, I feel as though I'm sitting here talking to Neal, and this is God's conversation with himself. This is what I believe, and it all stems from that experience. So I'm very curious to hear your experience.
Yeah, I had a big phase in my 20s and late teens, where I started to, as I got away from the whole the opiate world, as I got off of that stuff and was totally done with that stuff, and I got out of prison. I can't say that I did the sober, route. I went to, sometimes I still drink wine, even today. But when I was in my 20s, what I would do was I was really, really fascinated by psychedelics. I wanted to know about psychedelics, and I started to make DMT by myself.
Oh man.
Yeah, I started to make DMT and ayahuasca, and I would go to a lot of music festivals as well around the country. And I've had experiences that these are the reasons why I never totally fully went to the atheist side, because of these experiences, and this goes back to what we were saying about the whole Bronze Age theology of, like, your feelings and your emotions are literally the gods working through you, the muse working through you. And drugs was a big aspect in ancient cultures. Taking substances, and the diviners were called root cutters. Let me show you this. I think there's a root cutters. Ancient Greek. Let me see if I could find. I thought there was a Wikipedia page for it, but I guess not. But there was these in ancient Greek. There was a title for diviners, for mystics, and the word means root cutter. It's a root. They're people who go out. They go out into nature and they find certain herbs, mushrooms, and most of all, roots. And they would cut the roots of these trees and they would mix them into potions. And guess what? DMT and ayahuasca is primarily from extracting roots of acacia confucia root bark, and Mimosa hostilis root bark. And there's also like toads and different types of stuff where you can get it from. But those are the main sources of DMT and ayahuasca, is from root cutting. And this is what all throughout the ancient Greek sources, there was these mystics and these diviners and these medicine men and medicine women and priestesses called root cutters. And their job was to go out in nature and find roots and extract the drugs from them and take them in these ceremonies. Why? Because the way you feel is how you attune to these gods. So we know drugs is what attunes how we feel. So they just went a step further with it. It says not only can you attune how you feel, the gods are attuning how you feel through the drugs. And this is like, it's not. And by the way, this is why I was so interested in Amon Hillman's work.
Yep.
Before we had our fallout, because he's right about this. He's right about the idea that drugs were very central to these ancient mysteries. This is not just him saying this, though. This is obviously big in Karl Ruck's work.
Sure.
There's a whole dozens of classicists who've written on the idea of entheogens. But it's central. And so back to myself, this was central to me. was having these experiences where I would take DMT and I would literally meet a god. It would fly up into my face, spinning in all these orbs and shit. And I would speak telepathically to these gods. And it was amazing. It was an experience that I'll never forget. And it's always carried with me to this very day.
What did you learn from them, from those experiences? What did you take away?
The biggest takeaway I get from these experiences is the sort of oneness feeling. And this is going to sound repetitive, but it's true. A lot of people can relate to what I'm saying now. Is that when you have this experience, there's a feeling of oneness that you get, that you're inside of something that you can't necessarily detach from, that we are a part of something in this reality. And it's hard to explain, but there's a feeling that explains it more. You just got to feel it when you're there. Totally. I don't know words for it, but when you're in that state, you get it. You go, oh, I'm a part of this, and I'm always going to be a part of this. There's nothing that can take me away from it. And even when I die, I'm going to be a part of this. And it's everything's fine.
Totally, man.
There's some sort of like eternal peace that you get from this experience that I'll never be able to find words for. It's just, you just got to have your own experience.
Would you say that the fear of death is diminished or gone because of it?
Yeah. And this is what the ancient Eleusinian mysteries would report. They would take the koukaon, which is a mixture of different substances, but we not necessarily know exactly. I think mushrooms was part of it. And the common experience, the common takeaway that was reported, and we don't have a lot of reports because they were secret. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of writings on what happened in the mysteries, but the very few fragments and scraps that we have, all of them say that no longer people fear death. That was the main takeaway from the mysteries, that you knew that you had a place in the divine hierarchy of the cosmos, that you knew that there was something for you eternally, that there was a place that you were going to. That was the main takeaway.
Yeah, I don't think it's a surprise at all that you see the monism of the pre-Socratics and the Platonic philosophers. Like I was reading Porphyry and a bunch of those guys, and it was blowing my mind. They're just amazing. It's no coincidence that those ideas came from a culture that was doing the Kaikion every year. And it's no surprise that the culture that created the Upanishads were doing Soma and whatever that is, right? Whatever that is. But doing these psychedelic substances and having these unitive experiences, and then writing things like what Porphyry wrote and what Shankara wrote or whatever. I think there's a serious link there between psychedelic use and this unitive experience, and these ideas of monism that flow from that. I would be willing to say that it's the origin of religion, but I'll pump the brakes on that because I have a slightly different take. So I'll run this by you. So on the wall behind me, in front of me that you can't see, I have all sorts of images, ancient images. Mostly they're from cave paintings. You've probably seen the Sorcerer of Lascaux and La Trois Frères cave and Altamira and various places. These are 15, 20, 30,000 years old. The Lion Man of Holstadtstadel in Germany, it's 33,000 years old.
Right.
So I got all these therianthrope images on the wall behind me. And it's all very mystical. It's the type of thing that I can easily imagine seeing while I'm under the influence of a psychedelic. And you see them popping up in classical religions from the Bronze Age, like in particular ancient Egypt with all the animal-headed gods and Ganesha and in India and that kind of thing. But here's my thought on this. If this goes back to deep antiquity, I don't know that we can say that these all came from drug experiences. It's going to take some time to figure out what roots do what, and some people are going to have to die before you figure out the right mix and all of this. So I think something else, man. I think that there are other ways to have this sort of mystical experience that aren't that don't use psychedelic drugs or entheogens. The most common way is through starvation. So
what do you mean by that?
What I mean is There was a study that the U.S. military did in the 40s. It was called there was like a book or a booklet that was written. It was called something starvation, experimental starvation in man. And I read that, and I went on this website, the Altered States database, and I'm looking through all this stuff. And basically what it's showing you is that, here's the type of experiences people report from various drugs, but there's a whole category about starvation in this database. And it corresponds to that military study that I mentioned, where it says people who go extended periods of time without eating will hallucinate. They will have,
yeah.
They will have.
So that's where the fasting aspect comes in.
100%. And here's the thing about that. Imagine living in the Stone Age. Imagine how often you would be starving. Imagine how common it would be to have periods of time where you were literally starving and having mystical experiences and seeing these half man, half animal creatures and carving it in the caves. So I see a thread that runs through starvation and psychedelic drugs in antiquity that's tied to these half animal, half man beings that we see in our earliest religious images all the way through to the Bronze Age.
Yeah. There's something about the ritual of fasting that the ancients all pointed to was something, and it makes me, because I eat a lot, and it makes me wonder, maybe I should cut down and try to fast and see what that would do to my mental state. Because
totally,
this is a universal idea. No one disagreed on this. There's something about not eat. I wonder how back you mentioned, like the Stone Age, where people would have no choice. They might have to not find any food, or maybe they're just eating berries and drinking milk or something. And then like maybe there was like a something going on where there's some sort of calming, or some sort of like the gods are, it's okay. Like you're going to live, you're going to find your game. It's just not right now. There's something going on with that emotion that's triggered from that state, rather than depression. The opposite happens. It's fascinating. Totally. And then people who eat too much get depressed and get like high blood pressure and stuff. And like, it's the opposite. You would think you should be healthier from eating more, but no, you don't get healthier.
No, man, there's something that happens with your cellular like metabolism that improves when you don't eat. And then, of course they say your body, if it's not digesting food, it has the ability to heal and do things that it's usually too busy digesting food to do. And I've got this beautiful old religious grandma who fasts regularly, and she'll do like water or broth only for like extended periods of time. She's like one of these really impressive people that like makes you think twice about the legitimacy of Christianity and spirituality just by her example, man. And she's like 90 years old, and she'll go like 40 days just drinking broth. And she'll be the first to tell you, man, like if she's feeling sick or not well, or if she's in a psychological slump, she'll fast for extended periods of time and be fine.
Yeah. Wow. I don't know. There's something fascinating about that. And then it talks about in the Gospels, Jesus fasting for 40 days.
Totally.
So even Christianity, you would think Christianity would have more emphasis on fasting, but you don't see that a lot. I mean, I'm sure there's some sects out there that do it, but
even Moses, before he goes up Sinai to get the tablets from God, he fasts.
Yeah, 40 days, right? Same. I think it's the same amount of time.
Here exactly. So here's the thing, man. You fast and then you encounter God, and I think that is a pattern that has been a common human, experience since the beginning of human history.
Yeah, that's going back into the Paleolithic human right there. That's interesting.
Yes, sir.
Like you mentioned, and then that you find these Venus figurines. It's so funny because those Venus figurines of the Great Mother, we almost know, I wouldn't say for certain, but there's a lot of scholars would agree that particular type of Venus figurine ends up being the goddess Kokhba in Asia Minor, right not that far from where Göbekli Tepe is. There's a site that worships this Great Mother figurine, this big giant image of the Great Mother, and she's sometimes flanked by two lions. Sometimes she's the mother and the child or whatever, like it has the image. But then you find out this is the same region of the world where Christianity develops the mother, Mariology, right in the Asia Minor, Nicaea, Phrygia, Cappadocia. That's where all the Hittites, and that's where this is that part of the world where the Great Mother was venerated, and it's the same part of the world where Christians develop Mary veneration. So we can almost you can almost make a straight line from these ancient Stone Age Venus figurines and today's Mary veneration in Catholicism.
Totally.
It's
And I'll tell you
fascinating.
that Kubaba Kaibali connection, I learned that from you, and that blew my mind, man. In fact, I wanted to ask you about that because I wondered if there was, like, I don't know if all scholars talk about it this way, but people like what's her name, Gambutas, what's that lady's name? It's like Mary Gambutas, but it's not Mary. Anyway,
Oh yeah.
she talks about that culture as old Europe. That's what she calls it, old Europe. And she points out that they have all these goddesses. Their religions seem to center around goddesses. And to your point, there seems to be a trail there that leads all the way back to the Stone Age with these goddess figurines like the Venus of Brassenpoy and Venus of Willendorf and all these sort of things. I wonder if that was a form of, I want to use the word monotheism or monism again, but like a great mother monotheism in the Stone Age, where there isn't evidence of any other deities or any other figures that might be considered religious. At that time, they were all these fertility, emphasizing fertility goddess figurines.
Yeah, and like you said, there's also like the lion man structure, and then there's that links to a very common motif of the man conquering nature, like fighting lions, or like it's, there's a common motif of like some sort of figure conquering the beast, right?
Sure.
And that doesn't necessarily bring us. Is that a religious symbol? Is it some sort of Herculean figure? I would say maybe. So there's something about that. But like you said, the big one is these goddesses. They're everywhere, and they go back. Some of them go back to 100,000 years.
Incredible.
And I'm like, that's the really, really archaic ones. But when you get into the 10 to 50,000 range, there's a whole bunch of them, and they're very detailed. And they're like, you can see that people were thinking in terms of mystery, and divine, and salvation. These things, these ideas are on the table. Just by looking at these figurines, we can come away with these people had deep thoughts about the divine.
Completely.
Yeah.
Do you ever read any of those old anthropologists like Max Mueller and Bradley and was it F.H. Bradley and Otto? There's a bunch of them. You ever read any of those guys?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
So
for sure.
One of the things that they'll say, they'll talk about hunting magic, and they'll say, like, especially in those caves in France and Spain where you see like those buffalo or bison or whatever they are, and they go in and they carve or they draw buffalo over top of each other like this. It almost looks like they're moving, because year after year after year, the men of the tribe would go and they would carve and go over these images and make their own. And the idea is they were doing this to sort of magically assist the hunt. They were like summoning the animals. And this is all speculation. It's fun to speculate. So this is all speculation. But there's like something that's tied to hunting. And this is where my mind goes when I look at the cave paintings of the lion man and the bird man and the shaman that looks like a half man, half owl, half deer creature. What I see here, Neal, is, and this is just speculation, but I'm curious what you might think. I see people that are living hand to mouth. They're on the edge of life and death constantly. And whenever they kill an animal, I don't know, man, if you've ever been hunting or if you've ever been very hungry and had food, and just tastes so goddamn good because you're starving.
Yeah.
Like, the emotions are so heightened that when you kill an animal, and you're eating it and you're sharing that meat with your tribe, there's so much emotion there. And there's a idea that's reinforced that, like, you're seeing something die, you've taken its life. but it's necessary for you to sustain your life and the life of your family. And so there's a connection between my life and the life of the animals. There's a connection between my soul and the soul of the animal. I'm consuming it. It's one with me. And so I think there's some mystical shit going on in the mind of these ancient people where they connect themselves to nature. And this is connected to your Dionysus topic, by the way. And so they make these images of half man, half animal creatures because they had this recognition that something in life is one.
Yes.
What do you think? What do you make of that?
Not only that, you have this ancient Babylonian and also Roman custom of actually checking the entrails of the sacrifice for omens and prophecy. So they weren't, not only were they eating the animal and taking and offering pieces of the animal to the gods, do a burnt offering to the god, eat the animal, but then they would check the entrails of the animal and that the animal itself was connected to your destiny. And think about that. No one ever talks about why are we checking entrails of an animal? Why am I looking at organs and putting it on like this little device that they had? It's called a haroscopy. Can I share my screen on here?
I don't know. You can give it a try.
Let me see.
I'm going to share mine in a minute.
Let me see. Roman religion. 1 second.
Yeah.
Hera specs. This thing right here. Okay. Let me see. Share. It says, I understand. Okay, cool. It works. You see this?
I do. Hold on. Let's pop it on screen. There you go.
So this is called harospex. It's a person trained to practice divination by the inspection of entrails of sacrificed animals, especially the liver of a sacrifice. Look at the sacrificed sheep, poultry, a practice called harospicy in the ancient Roman religion. Various ancient cultures of the Near East, Babylonians. By the way, this image, this right here, this is an Etruscan device. We've dug up, archaeologists, I always say we, but archaeologists have dug up almost an identical device as this with cuneiform all over it in Babylon. So we know that this device wasn't just something the Romans or Etruscans invented. This was some sort of universal science. I wonder if they have older ones. Here it is right here, Akkadian language, clay sheep models, local dialect, dated to the 19th century BCE. You can see it's the same device. It's got the little portions sticking out. It's got the 3 portions sticking out.
Yeah.
The different versions of it. But here's the Etruscan one. And so they would use these things. That's called the protruding viscera, right? So what they would do is they would put the entrails on here and then observe where the letters would line up, and they would have some sort of divination. This is, by the way, this is the book that I have right here. This is how I knew about the Babylonian. It's funny that this is in here, where it says he says it right here. The spread of hepatoscopy is one of the clearest examples of cultural contact in the Orientalizing period. It must have been a case of East-West understanding on a relatively high technical level. Now, this is I don't know how much people are going to grasp this, but like this is Semitic-speaking people from the Near East and Indo-European speaking people from Europe understanding very deep concepts of each other and doing similar things that they thought were the science of the day. It's mind-blowing. The trading of culture goes beyond what we think of as we think of the Indo-Europeans did this and the Babylonians and Semitic people did this. Like, no, they were all sort of borrowing from each other. But he says it right here. The mobility of migrant charismatics is the natural prerequisite for this diffusion. The international role of sought-after specialists, scientists, or if you will, who were, as far as their art was concerned, nevertheless, to their father teachers, we cannot expect to find many archaeological identifiable traces with such people, other than some exceptional instances. And like Ezekiel even mentions the taking of the liver.
Oh wow!
So this is a widely spread known divination practice. But back to what we were saying, it's going back to the idea of sacrificing an animal. So there's something about animal sacrifice that was so important. And I always think about this. How, if animal sacrifice does not work, if it's just like, okay, I could sacrifice an animal, am I really going to win the battle the next day? If it wasn't working, why did it continue for so long? And why was it taken so seriously by these, like Alexander the Great was sacrificing goats and bulls when he would go into battle, and he would check the entrails, and then the priest would tell him if he should go invade the next city or not. He took this extremely seriously. Why? That's what I want to know.
They took it so seriously that I think mostly prior to the predominance of animal sacrifice, it was human sacrifice. That's how serious they took it. It was their children. Boy, I wanted to tell you, I have a buddy. I haven't talked to him in many years, but I have a Palestinian buddy, a Jordanian buddy, and he was such a nice guy, man. Welcomed me into his family, and I learned a lot of the culture from him. And his wife.
I've been to Jordan, by the way.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I know you were in Greece. I went to Petra.
I went to Petra in Jordan.
Fantastic. Anyway, his wife would make the Turkish coffee for us, like little demi-tasse cups. You probably had that when you were in Jordan. And he would tell me that when you were done drinking the coffee, it's got like that paste, because the way they make the coffee, it's got like this paste at the bottom. So if you drink it too much, you're going to get a mouthful of paste. They would take the cup and the plate and they would flip it over when they were done. And it would let the paste would sort of run down the cup. And then the women, the grandmother, the matriarchs, then they would lift the cup and they would use the patterns in the coffee grounds to tell the future. It was a divination practice.
There you go.
It's an Arab divination practice.
Yeah. And what you said right before you switched to that was that the human sacrifice thing was big. I don't think people realize how because there's animal sacrifice, but like when things got really bad, they would offer a human because they thought that was that was the highest sacrifice you can offer. In fact, the highest sacrifice you can offer is a king. Talk about hierarchy, right? And being. The Babylonians had what was called a mock king ritual.
Yes.
And the king of Babylon would legally dethrone himself and get exiled on purpose. And he was no longer king. He was an exiled king legally on paper. And they would anoint a new king. They would just pick somebody from the lowest, whatever, from any part of society, and they would anoint a new king. And then they would let him be king for a while. And then they would sacrifice him through human sacrifice, because they would dress him in purple, put a crown on his head, and then it would sacrifice him to the gods. Why? Because that's the highest sacrifice you can give, is the king of Babylon. And so this became a ritual. And by the way, some people think what's happening in the Gospels is a mimesis of the mock king ritual, where Jesus is called the King of the Jews. It literally writes it on the cross. They dress him in purple. They put a crown on his head, and they sacrifice him. That's the highest sacrifice you can get.
That's even more compelling when you consider the Muslim position, and you'll have to fill me in on this, but what was the Gnostic group that believed Jesus was replaced on the cross?
Yes, that he didn't actually go to the cross, that he did something to make people think that he was actually Thomas, and that Thomas was Jesus, and that they switched places. This is why he's called the twin.
Yes.
And that Thomas is the one who actually got crucified. Jesus got away.
And they say the same thing in Islam, and that's a replacement for the king in exactly the same way you just described in the Babylonian ritual.
Isn't that something? Where he escapes, but then they make him a new king, and they trick God that way. Yeah. Wow, I didn't even think about that way. What you just said actually makes sense. That could have been what they thought happened.
Totally.
The real king got away, and then he becomes re-anointed, because this is what they would do. After the king would die, they would re-anoint the old king back. And the reason why they would do this is because they would get they would get bad omens, and there would be like a shooting star in a bad direction or something. And the priest would say, that's an omen that's going to cause famine and disease and poverty. And if we don't do something about that, millions of people are going to die. We're going to lose our kingdom. So they would sacrifice one to save many, or what they thought. It's pretty fascinating.
It is. It's these kind of patterns, man. It's these kind of patterns that keep me so interested in this exploring this topic. I'm just going to continue to study religion for the rest of my life. I have no doubt. It's these sorts of things, man.
Yeah, me too.
I want to show you a picture. This has to do with comparative religion, which comparative mythology, comparative religion is a topic that, is sort of the central to Gnostic Informant. And I love it. I eat it up. Here's one thing, and I'm sure you've seen it, but I don't know if anyone's ever asked you. So I'd like to ask you. Let me just pull this up here. Entire screen window, this one right here. All right. All right, you can see that?
Yep. Oh yeah.
Okay.
That's the motif I was talking about.
So just for the audience here, so on the left, you have a seal that came from Mohenjo-Daro. This is the Indus Valley civilization, which we know almost nothing about, but it's as old, if not older, than the civilizations in Mesopotamia, and it's called Proto-Shiva. So maybe it's a depiction of Shiva, but it dates back to 2000 BC. On the right, you have a Celtic image. I don't know if it's like certain, but they say it's Cernunnos. I don't know.
Yeah. That one's more likely to be Carunos. The one on the left, the reason why it's called Proto-Shiva is because it's not Shiva. We don't know the name of this god because we don't know how to read that particular text yet. No one's decoded it yet. But Shiva later on is depicted very similarly as this god. So that's why some people just call it Proto-Shiva. Okay,
makes sense. And so this image on the right is from 200 BC. So there's a gulf of time and space between the image on the left and the image on the right. However, if you look at these images, Neal, they are fascinatingly similar, man.
Oh, yeah.
In both cases,
the Master of Animals motif.
The Master of Animals.
This is, right. You know that Göbekli Tepe has an image similar to this.
I did not know that.
Yeah, let's pull. Let me see if I can pull it up.
Yeah.
Göbekli Tepe. I think it's Göbekli Tepe. It's one of those Stone Age spots in. It's one of the tepes. Master of Animals. Let me see if I could find. Here it is, right here. This one. Okay, I don't know what website this is, but I just saw it has the image I'm looking for, so I'm clicking on it. This is from some blog, but look, there's this is the image right here. This is from Göbekli Tepe. I think it might be actually. Let me see if I can. Are you still seeing my screen right now?
No, let me pull it. I got it on the screen now. There I am. I see it now. Yeah.
Okay. Where'd it go?
There was your Kubaba.
Yeah. Wait, where'd it go?
Yeah, there was the Birdman.
This one. I think this is Göbekli Tepe.
Oh.
But this is definitely a Stone Age in Turkey. And it's a man with two lions.
Looking, and he's like holding his cock.
He looks like he is. And that actually is a gesture, an ancient gesture of like, I'm a man. Like I'll hold my junk right. Like this is what I do. I'm the dog that pisses on the tree, motherfucker. Like that's what that means. It's a very masculine.
Does he have horns by any chance? Can you tell?
I don't know if you can tell if he has horns, but
okay,
that would be crazy if he had horns. Actually, it looks like there's maybe just ears, but
that's fascinating.
I don't know if you would call that horns, but yeah, basically what I'm getting at is, okay, this is Kettle Hewick. So let me just see. I thought that was good. I don't know why I thought that was. Oh wait, no. This is Master of Animals at Sayberg. One of the Tas Tepler sites, 25 kilometers from Göbekli Tepe. That's what that is. Okay, so let me see. When is Sayberg? I want to see when is that date to? That's a good question, real quick, just so I can get that off real quick. It says, it's a 10,000 year old. Yeah, it's one of the old ones.
Yeah, so
it's right there.
Tepe,
It's definitely Stone Age, that's for sure. So it's a Stone Age depiction of what looks like to be the master of animals. And so a lot of these ancient what do they call them? Advanced technology people, even though I think they're wrong about the advanced technology and aliens or whatever the hell they do, they are right that there is a lot of these very mysterious depictions of in the archaeology of very similar motifs, like the master of animals going back to the Stone Age, which does show widespread trading going on. So more advanced than we previously thought. And by the way, this is not, academics agree on this. They're not like pushing back on this, as a lot of people will say. Like you'll hear people say academics hate when you talk about this. No, they're writing papers on this. They're the ones that tell us about this stuff. So
yeah, amazing. Let me pull this back up because I want to ask you a question about syncretism.
Here's another one real quick I just found. I'll show you one more.
Yeah, sure.
I just pulled this one up real quick. 3rd millennium BCE. There it is. Called the Giraffe Stone.
Yeah, there it is. Oh, yeah.
And it's one of those like hand things that all those people are obsessed with.
Oh, yeah, those little bags. Yeah, okay, yeah.
That's cool.
Interesting. Yeah, man. Like I think when I see that Master of Animals motif, it looks so similar to the Therianthrope cave paintings that I was talking about. By the way, I borrowed that term from Graham Hancock. I love that Therianthrope, Therion beast, Anthropos man, beast man. So I want to ask you about syncretism. I kind of want to, since I'm speaking Greek now, I kind of want to. You brought up Amun Hillman, and I'm not gonna press you on Amun because I know there's.
Oh, you could if you want. I don't care.
One of the things he said was that when you learn Greek, it's an enlightening experience. Like he made it out like it changes your understanding of language, and it allows you to think in ways that you can't if you just know English. And I'm very curious.
That's the case for every language, though. Not to shit on Greek, because it's true what he's saying. When you learn any language, even learning Hebrew, starts to make you think about language differently. Any language you learn will make you think about language differently. That's just how languages are. But Greek is very, very Greek in a bigger sense, because Greek is so technical, and Greek has so much underlying Indo-European stuff that we find in our language today, that it is definitely eye-opening and definitely enlightening. Yeah.
And how advanced are you in Greek now? You've been doing it for a while.
I'm actually getting pretty good now. I can translate text. Yeah.
It's so impressive, Neal. When you do that, man, back in the day, man, you would have the English translation of Hesiod or whatever, and now you're like you're reading the Greek, man. That is so impressive, man.
Yeah, it's because inspiring. I want to go right to the source, and I think the source is because a lot of times the translations can be misleading. So when I pull up a lobe, I'll look at the Greek and then make sure the translation is what the Greek says,
Yeah. So before we leave this topic of Greek, I want to mention two things. First thing is, and I'm going to give you credit for this. I, like, after seeing a lot of your stuff, really dove into the primary sources more, and I'm relying on translations because I don't speak the language. And I'm using a lot of like open source documents because they're free, right? So I'm going to like sacredtext.com and I'm looking at these translations from the 1800s and all this. And I'm reading Works and Days by Hesiod.
Oh, yeah.
And I come across this passage that I love. And because it fits my biases about religion, I repeat it ad nauseum all the time. And the phrase goes like this. I will sum up another tale, how the gods and mortal men sprang from one source. How the gods and mortal men sprang from one source. So in my mind, this is an allusion to a monism or a monotheism. It's saying, look, the gods and mortal men share an origin. Turns out, I go to AI and I'm like, I'm asking questions about it, and AI is telling me this doesn't exist. This passage doesn't exist. And I'm like, I'm getting pissed. I'm like, no. It's in this lady's translation. It's on page whatever. And they come back and they tell me that the English translation, this particular English translation, added this line to transition from one part of the story to the other, and it's not in the original.
Really?
Yeah, it's a lot. It's 11:106 to 108 is what it's supposed to
Let's
be.
take a look right now. Let's take a look. I'm just curious. We can
Yeah.
do. If anyone's watching, we can do a little. This is like a little lesson, I guess, in translation stuff. So what line is it?
11 lines 106 and 108.
11 line 106. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
so it's just 106. Okay, let's go here. 106. So if you wish, I shall recapitulate another story correctly and skillfully. This is one you're talking about?
Yes. Yeah. Keep reading. How the gods and mortal human beings came. Okay, so it's legit.
Came from the same origin. Well, this is the lobe. So we can look at the Greek. We can see,
Yes.
okay. So it says right here, hos, homothen, gegasi, theoi, the gods, how the gods came about right here. And thentoi, anthropoi, and mortals and gods came about. So this is showing some sort of Greek line from
Okay.
somewhere. So the
AI will lie to you, Neal.
ChatGPT said that this line, it doesn't exist in the original manuscript.
That's what it was telling me. Yep.
Wow. Well, whatever Loeb produced, I don't know if this Greek is there. I don't know which part did you say exactly didn't exist?
This particular line, the gods and mortal men sprang from one source. Does it say the same origin there? Can you tell?
Yeah, right here, Gagasi.
Okay. Okay. Fantastic. So this I'm gonna get this tattooed on me. Just to give you some context.
Here, let's do a breakdown. Let's see ChatGPT break this down for us. Ready? I'm gonna have ChatGPT break it down right here and show you exactly the word. I'm just doing that one line. So here we go. Okay. So this is exactly a breakdown of ChatGPT. Hesiod. It says hos, how, right? And then here's the word homothen, from the same origin, and then have been born, gegasi, theoi, gods, and mortal human. See,
amazing.
It's just very simple Greek. There's no other way to interpret that. That's exactly. Okay. This is just basic from the origin. That's what that word means, of the origin. You know what I mean? And then this is perfect active indicative, have coming to being. So it's an active form. So there's no other way you can translate. The question are these 1, 2, 3, 4? Are these 5 words in the Greek manuscripts? Let's ask it.
Yeah.
Are these 5 Greek words in the original manuscripts of Hesiod? Yes. It says yes. Isn't that weird how ChatGPT will be? I don't know what's up with ChatGPT. Were you asking Grok or something else?
I think it might have been Copilot, and I was seriously bummed about it. So this is like making my day.
It says right here, the only minor manuscript variant is that this one has a movable N at the end, movable new, which makes no difference at all. It's the same word.
Beautiful.
It's just that some dialects say gagasi, some of them say gagasin.
Okay.
They just put an N sound at the end. That's it. So
now, you agree that this statement here reflects some kind of a monist idea even in 500 BC from Hesiod?
Oh yeah, and not only that, I'm going to show you another source right now. Saturnalia. Watch this. He cites Hesiod. I believe it has Saturnalia. Yes, here we go. So let me share my screen again. So this is all the way in late antiquity. This is like 400 AD. And you get he's talking about monism and how we all came from one God. And he says, do you think I'm not going to go over well-known ground? Virgil, his model for pastor, Hesiod, the agriculture. Oh, not this one. Right here. I think this is it. Hesiod says, oh, wait, is it this one? Oh, wait, I'm trying to think. What source was Hesiod cited for monism. I thought it was this one, but maybe not. But he says Hesiod says that you reach a middle wine jar. No, that's not it. Anyways, I'll have to think about that. I forgot there. Okay, but there is a source. I do know this. I don't know exactly. Stop sharing. I forgot what source it is. Wait, I gotta think of this now. This is gonna blow. This is going to. It might be Plutarch. Plutarch on Isis and Osiris. Let me see if I can find this real quick. Wait, hold on. Okay, Hesiod. Let me see if I can find Hesiod. No, wait, is this the verse? No, not this one. Here, this might be it right here. Yes, here we go. Okay, so it's Plutarch. I don't know. I just couldn't think of which source it was. I remember reading this. So back to what you said. Do I think Hesiod is pointing to some sort of monism? I would say yes. Not only yes, Plutarch also agrees with you. Because here in Plutarch's On Isis and Osiris, this is in the Roman period, hundreds of years after Hesiod, 700 years after Hesiod lived, Plutarch, who's a Platonist, so he believes in the one, he says Hesiod, making the very first thing of all to be chaos and earth, did not accept any other origins, but only these. If we transfer the name somewhat to assign Isis in the name of earth and Osiris in the name of love from Tartarus, the poet seems to place chaos at the bottom of a sort of region that serves as a resting place for the cosmos. They use the word universe with the capital U here, but the Greek uses the word all, pontos, all.
I love that.
See what I mean?
That reminds me of Nun from Egyptian mythology.
Yeah. So yeah, even and so like then he gets into Plato. So like Hesiod was also part of this tradition of attributing the one. That's what they thought. That's what these Platonists thought. So, anyways.
Amazing. All right, let me pull this one up for you. All right, so I don't know, it's probably super small, but I just have a couple of quotes here, and some of these I probably took from one of your documentaries, like Macrobius. I haven't read, so I probably took that from you. But I'm super fascinated with the Orphic literature, and
that's from the source we were just looking at, by the way, Macrobius and Saturnalia. Yeah.
Nice. I guess what I want to ask you here is if you think syncretism is connected to monism. So okay. All right. So maybe we don't have to go through this then, but
no, let's see the sources though. Let's see the sources.
Yeah. So Hippolytus is talking about Pythagoras. So I'm just going to give this a date of in the 500s BC. It says Pythagoras declared that the unbegotten monad was the father of the dyad and the mother of all engendered things. And then Plato echoes that, and Alcibiades saying 100 years later, all things are the progeny of one fire, one divine nature. The monad is there first and is extended, which generates two. Those statements are, they're echoing each other as far as I'm concerned. And then when you get to Macrobius and the Orphic hymns down here, then you get this really interesting stuff, man. And you blew my mind with this Yao stuff, by the way, where Macrobius says, understand that the highest god is Yao, who is Hades in winter, Zeus in spring, Apollo in summer, and gentle Bacchus in autumn. And the Orphics echoing that by saying one Zeus, one Hades, one Helios, one Dionysus, one God in all. So I like to read this because I'm just a biased person, and this is sort of where I want this, what I want this to mean. So I'm just being honest about it. It seems to me that the syncretism that we see here, making this equivalency between Yao, Zeus, Apollo, Bacchus, and so forth, they're saying, no, this is one God. I see this, Neal, as henotheism. I see it as there is the monad, but the monad is all of these gods. Is known by all of these names and all of these patterns. What do you make of that?
Well, yeah, that's true. But why would that be henotheism? Because if it was henotheism, they'd be choosing just one of those.
So, and it's very possible that I don't understand henotheism well enough. But again, going back to the illustration about Hinduism, it's in
Yeah.
truth, Hinduism has thousands and thousands of gods.
Yeah.
And
There's a very henotheistic aspect in Hinduism, because in Hinduism, local customs pick one god that they venerate. So yeah,
they do exactly. So, but I think that it's a consensus that Brahma is all of these gods. Whether you're worshiping Brahma as Shiva or
yeah, but that takes you away. So what I get what you're just I understand where you're going with this. The thing I would add to is saying you're going from henotheism to monism when you switch from your local god that you venerate to the more philosophical language of the one. So there's a monistic philosophy and a henotheistic theology going on at the same time. They're worshiping their local god Shiva, but they understand there to be one, which is monism. So you can actually have monism and henotheism going on at once. You're acting out henotheism while understanding monism.
And I think this is probably related to something you brought up earlier, which is that there's this idea of the transcendent one as being above worship, as being inaccessible.
It doesn't.
Right?
It doesn't want you to worship it. It doesn't need your worship. There's no need for it. It has no needs because it's perfect. And
you can't manipulate it. I've always thought that was an interesting thing about sacrifice, by the way, is that human beings seem to have this idea that they can get what they want, or to your point about the Babylonian ritual, that they can pull the wool over God's eyes. Like, like I as a human being can manipulate the divine to get what I want. That just seems like a strange thing, right?
It does. It does. It's interesting how you get these legalistic texts and these legalistic theologies that are like, well, if we do this, God will do this. So therefore, if we do this, we can get around that. And it's just like, wait a minute. Are you just saying that God is just something we need to get around? It's very odd. But it's fascinating to think about people actually thinking that was how to do things.
It reminds me of that. There was an episode of the Y-Files. I don't know if you ever watched that, but an episode of the Y-Files where he was talking about in New York, in New York City, they have a I don't know enough about Judaism, but it's an unbroken string, some sort of thing that outlines the Brooklyn, wherever all the Jews live there. I don't know. I don't know enough.
Yeah, Washington Heights.
Okay, so that on the Sabbath, it's considered to be their house. Like there's certain things that they can't leave their house or something. So they put this. So the point is that the Jews are very creative about working around the rules.
Yes,
and I just find that fascinating.
They are definitely the Talmud. Most of the Talmud is like, how can we trick God so we can do things on the Sabbath?
Exactly. Get yourself a goy. You'll be all right.
Yeah.
All right. So Neal, we're coming up on 2 hours. So there's basically maybe one other thing that I'll ask you about in our last remaining minutes. And this really, I wouldn't get into any of the Christianity stuff, but this has to do with Christianity in a sense. My favorite myths are the creation myths. I could almost do without any of the others. I love the creation myths the best, and I am not afraid to say it. So some of them are really fascinating to me, and some of them are separated by so much space and time that it's hard to understand how they can be so similar. The ones that I'm thinking of right now are the Pangu myth from China, or Panku, that Taoist myth about the god sacrificing his body to create the cosmos. And you have this with Ymir in Scandinavia, where this primordial frost giant, sacrifices his body or is killed, and his body becomes the cosmos. And then there's Prajapati in India. This is one of the creation myths from the Vedas that it runs in the same exact pattern. Now, I realize that both the Vedic story and the Nordic story are Indo-European, so maybe they have some connection that explains it. But in China, it's really difficult for me to understand how there could be borrowing, or you could explain how this Taoist myth is borrowing from the Indo-Europeans, unless you have something else to add there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of overlap in these Indo-European traditions about creation that you find all the way from the ancient Irish myths, and then seeing how much overlaps with what you find in the Rig Veda. And Rig Veda even has the epic of the creation in the Rig Veda. They don't even call the god Brahma. They call it the one in Sanskrit. It's called the one created the cosmos. Yes.
In the Rig Veda?
I'll show you right now.
Yeah.
Right now. Yeah. Creation, epic, Rig Veda. It should come right up. There it is. Nasiddha Sakta. Look at this. It has the Sanskrit and everything on this Wikipedia page. So Nasiddha Sakta means not the non-existent. It's also known as the hymn of creation. It's the 129th hymn of the 10th mandala of the Rig Veda. So it's Rig Veda is the oldest.
Yes.
And I think there's a dating in here somewhere where it dates it. Let me just see if I can find that first before I can. No, but anyways, it's from sometime in the. I would probably date it to like 500 BC or something like that. Maybe even before. Some people will even say before that. Some people will even say 1000 BC. I don't know, but it's old. It's very ancient. Let's just leave it there. Here's the text. Here's the Sanskrit over here. Here's the transliteration, and here's what the translation from Basham says. Then even non-existence was not there, nor existence. There was no air, nor space. What covered it? Where was it? And who's keeping? Was there the cosmic fluid in depths unfathomed? Remember the two waters motif is very common.
Yes.
Then there was neither death nor immortality, nor was there the torch of night and day. The one breathed windlessly and self-sustaining. There was that one, then there was no other. At first, only darkness wrapped in darkness. All this was only unillumined cosmic water. That's very common motif. That one, which came to be enclosed in nothing, arose at last, born of the power of knowledge. That's very Gnostic right there.
Yeah,
in the beginning, that's a metaphysical concept that we all know exists. Knowledge exists. It's metaphysical. It's not physical. In the beginning, desire descent. By the way, desire. Hesiod's creation epic has Eros as the first god that springs forth from chaos. You have Eros and Nyx, and then Erebus, and then heaven and earth, Gaia and Uranos. Was the primal seed born from the mind. The sages who have searched with their hearts with wisdom know that which is kin, that which is not. So you have this one, you know what I mean? This one being, which is the word? What's the word they use for the one? I forgot what the word is. Anyway, it's in here though.
There's a phrase in the Rig Veda in one of the creation stories that calls the one the embryo that is everything. It's there's a couple of different creation stories. I'm trying to remember. Visvam Garbam, the embryo that is everything.
Wow. But yeah, you can see the monism is there. It's pervading all of these ancient creation epics. There's something going on with that.
Yeah, totally, man.
But the funny part about Hesiod is the humans are created from the hands of Prometheus, whereas the gods spring forth from the one, or the chaos, Hesiod calls it. They spring forth. It's just it's a creation from nothing, creation ex nihilo.
Yes. So the reason I bring up those examples, Neal, is because I see them as a self-sacrificial motif. You see the same thing in ancient Egypt with Atum. He's called he who makes himself into millions. So this primordial god Atum becomes everything and everyone. And so, you see that motif with Odin hanging from Yggdrasil, sacrificing himself to himself. And I just wonder, this pattern that you see, it seems to be echoed in the story of Jesus. And I wonder what significance you make of that.
What exactly you think echoes Jesus in there?
God sacrificing. So maybe I have to explain a little bit. Remember when I said that the unitive experience that I had made me see the cosmos as one with God and all of the things in it?
Yeah.
So when Jesus, as the incarnation, when God dies, sacrifices voluntarily himself for us, I see that as God sacrificing himself to himself.
Yeah.
And so this is the source of creation in all these various stories. It's echoed in the Norse story of Odin and all of that.
Oh, I
and,
see.
And so we see this pattern coming up again in Christianity. So whether or not Jesus was a historical character,
Right.
you have this pattern recurring, and it seems to be very ancient. It seems to continue to pop up over and over and over again.
Well, you want to know? I was going to say there's another version of this in the Orphic Mysteries.
Let's hear it.
And in the Orphic Mysteries, Zeus gets Persephone pregnant. It's the divine marriage between the god of heaven and the queen of the underworld. It makes Hera so jealous that she sends the Titans to go kill the baby. The baby is Zagreus, the first form of Dionysus.
Yep.
And they do this. They find the child. And Zeus says, he will inherit my thunderbolt and become the king, become the nous. He is God. He is Zeus. He's little Zeus. And so he is going to be the nous of the cosmos. He's the next mind of God. He's the next mind of the cosmos. And this infuriates Hera. So and Hera is like the Pharisees she sends her Titans out and they tear apart Dionysus and they ritually consume his flesh like a Eucharist. And Zeus is so angered by this, he takes the body of the Titans and he uses their bodies to recreate the cosmos in a new way so that everything on earth is matter and spirit. The spirit is Dionysus and the matter is the Titan flesh.
So I thought that story was about the creation of man, not the rebuilding of the cosmos.
He sends a cosmic deluge that destroys everything, and he restarts all of humanity.
So you see this thing up here, God plus matter equals man, and I'm showing the Diodorus quote here that talks about that story. From the ashes of the Titans who were struck down by Zeus, humans were created, possessing both divine nature of Dionysus. And so what I find so fascinating about this, Neal, is this.
And by the way, this is also inherited sin. What do you call it?
Original sin.
Original sin, because of the Titan flesh, we are bound to die and have sin.
Interesting.
There's an original sin aspect in the Orphic Mysteries, but go ahead.
Interesting. No, I was just going to point out that if you go back to the Enuma Elish, you have the same story here that says
Enki is Prometheus. Right. They're the same god.
Nintu shall mix clay.
This shows you how much overlap there is between the Indo-European traditions and the ancient Semitic traditions.
Totally.
There's tons of overlap there.
You've got the blood of the god mixed with clay to make man. But you know what? Here's where it gets even weirder, because we can't use the Indo-European thread. This one here. This is from the Florentine Codex. It's an Aztec myth. It says, when Quetzalcoatl had gathered the bones, he ground them up like corn, and the gods sprinkled them with their own blood. Thus humans were created from the bones of the ancestors and the blood of the gods.
That's a lot of comparative aspects, even with. And here's what some people have proposed when it comes to this. The people that are living in South America and Mexico originally did come from Eurasia. Their roots go because they went over that Alaskan bridge. I don't know how many thousands of years ago. Somebody can look that up. But at some point, they do go back to where, right next to being neighbors with Indo-Europeans. Because they would be, if they're going, there'd be like Siberia, Mongolia, Northern Asia, Japan.
Sure. Yep.
They came from that part of the world. And that's genetic studies have proven that the natives, the South American natives, and even the Alaskan and North American tribes, the Cherokees, they're closely related to Asians.
Yes.
So they came from that part of the world, which means at some point in their deep history, they were neighboring the Indo-European steppe people. So there might have been some ancient myths, and that's what you're finding. When you see these overlaps, you're looking at the oldest myths of all. That's what that tells me.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And that's actually more fascinating than to say that there was an ancient ancient civilization that spread this around. No,
Yeah.
that would be crazy if that was true. But it's actually more compelling that these myths are so old that they just go back that far.
Neal, you ever read what's his name? Michael Witzel?
No, I haven't.
He's a scholar. He wrote a book called The Origin of the World's Mythology, and it's a big tome, but I think you would like it. You should put it on the list. He got kind of dragged through the mud during the Me Too stuff and all of the woke craziness. He was called a racist for his ideas. E.J. Michael Witzel is his name. Really, probably worth a look. So we're almost out of time. I want to squeeze in one more. What do you think about this idea? As you were just talking about the Zagreus story, and I was so effing fascinated by all your stuff on Dionysus. Just incredible stuff. The connections to Shiva, the connections to the Minoans, just tremendous. What do you think about this idea that Dionysus is Zeus reborn? Right? He's the son. He's the son born from the father. So there's sort of there's something here that reminds me of father and son from Christianity.
There's a second part of that myth that I just told, where because when the Titans consumed his flesh, Athena runs in there and finds his still beating heart, and she brings it to Delphi. And she makes a potion out of it and gives it to Semele, who drinks it, and then she is impregnated by Zeus. And then it's the second born Dionysus. And but here's what happens. Semele again Hera is jealous, and she goes to pregnant Semele and tells her to go look at Zeus in his complete form, in his natural form. Ask him to show you his natural form. She doesn't know what this means. So she goes and asks Zeus, "Can I see your natural form?" And he warns her, "If you see my natural form, you'll die. Mortals cannot see my form." But he does, for some reason, he does it anyway, and she does die. But she was 7 months pregnant. So they run a C-section on her, and they take the 7-month premature
fetus.
Yeah, it's still a fetus. And they sew it up into Zeus's thigh. And then Zeus has the child 3 months later. Zeus gives birth to Dionysus. It literally, he comes from the bosom of the Father. And in John's gospel, John says Jesus came from the bosom of the Father. He uses the same language in Greek that it uses for Dionysus, coming from the bosom. The word for knee is the word for bosom. It's the same word. Thigh, I mean. So Jesus is from the thigh of Yahweh, and Dionysus is from the thigh of Zeus.
So the son born of the Father.
Born from the bosom of the Father.
So I want to plug in just really quickly. I was reading the Talmud. I was reading the places where the Talmud talks about Jesus. And one of the stories in the Talmud is that Jesus was a magician, and he sneaks into the temple, and he takes the name of God, and he magically opens up his thigh, and he puts the name of God into his thigh, and he sort of sneaks out with it. And this is the explanation for why he could do miracles. So it's just a weird connection between that being in his thigh.
I gotta go look at that now. You have to send me that passage, because I'm gonna have to take a look. That is I didn't even know about that. That sounds like there's some Dionysian echoes going on there.
And you made plenty of points about the Dionysian connections to the first temple, and that all that stuff's fascinating. We're getting off track, Neal. Here's the main question. If in Dionysus you have something like the reborn Zeus, or the new Zeus, the son born of the Father, and then one of the things I took from your episode on Dionysus that was so powerful to me was understanding that when you go back to the earliest manifestations of Dionysus, what you have is something that's supposed to represent the spirit of life and growth in nature. That you might even say the spirit of nature, the thing in the grapes that ripens them, the thing in the earth that brings the crops.
Life itself. Yeah.
It's life itself. And I just wonder if you see in that echoes of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Zeus, Dionysus, and life.
The oldest triad that we find in the Christian sources is actually, I can show you right now. I can show you right now in Cross Bible. I can show you right now in Cross Bible. Let's see this. Share my screen. So if we go to John 1. Okay. In the beginning was the Logos. There's one part of the triad, and the other part of the triad is God, the Father. So you have Logos and Theos. That's a dyad. It says it right here. He was with God in the beginning. Hotos hen arche pros ton theon. He was with God in the beginning. And then it says, so we have a dyad. It's already there. There's no debate there. There's a dyad with Word and God. So there's two forms of God. And there's God, and then there's the Word of God. The Word of God comes from God, right? But then it says, in him was life. En autoi zoe. And kai e zoe and to phos, ton anthropon. And that zoe, I really think they should make a new translation where the way they make a capital W and a capital G, they should make a capital, not life, they should say Zoe.
Dude, that's so Gnostic. It reminds me of Sophia.
Yeah, it says in him was, and by the way, the Gnostic scriptures call Sophia Zoe. Did you know that?
No.
I'll show you right now. It's from, what is it? It's from here. What is
Sophia?
I think it's from Pistis Sophia. Actually, hold on one second. Here it is right here. I actually had it right on the ground over here because I was looking through it recently. This is right here. This is a scholarly compilation. It's called the Gnostic Bible. It's a scholarly compilation of all the Gnostic text. And there's a bunch of texts, I should say, where it says the name Sophia. Look at here it is right here. Pistis Sophia. You're right, it is Pistis Sophia. On the origin of so this one's called On the Origin of the World. And it says, when Sabaoth received the place of rest because of his repentance, Pistis also gave him her daughter, Zoe. And it even says the name Sophia Zoe as one name. It is a hyphenated name, Sophia Zoe as one name. I'm trying to see if I can find that real quick before I forgot what source that was, but it's a very common. I know it's in here somewhere in this particular. Valentinian. Here we go. Secret Book of James. I think this is it. Secret Book of James, is it? No, not that one. Hang on one second. I'll find it. I will find it.
Do the Jeopardy music.
Yeah. Here we go. Maybe I can find it in the index. Yeah, maybe I can do the index. Sophia. Sophia Zoe. There it is. See also Sophia Zoe. 442, 446, 447. All right, let's try 442. This is from On the Origin of the World. Same text that I was just looking through. I just missed it for some reason. It says right here. The Virgin, Holy Spirit. At his left, the Virgin of the Holy Spirit sits upon praising him, and 7 virgins stand before her with 30 lyres and harps and trumpets on all of the armies of the angels. But he sits on a throne concealed by a great cloud, and there was no one with him in the cloud except Sophia, the daughter of Pistis, teaching him about all those that exist in the 8th heaven in order that his kingdom might continue until the consummation of heaven. Now, Pistis Sophia separated him from darkness and summoned him to her right. But the chief curator, since the day of his been called, where does it say her name is Zoe, though? Oh, here we go. In the next page, it says, their names and their functions you will find in the book of Solomon. In the presence of those, Zoe, who dwells with Sabaoth, created 7 good androgynous powers. And then if you keep going, 446, 447, it's throughout this whole book, it calls her Sophia Zoe. Wow. Here it is right here. Here it is, 447. Then the authorities received knowledge necessary to create people. Sophia Zoe, who is with Sabaoth, anticipated them and laughed. So there you go. Sophia is Zoe.
Wow.
That's just a Gnostic given. Now with that knowledge, think about this for a second. We know that these early Gnostics in the Valentinian circles in the 100s AD said that there was 3 parts of God, Logos, and Sophia, or Zoe. And then right here it says it. In him was Zoe.
Wow. And
that Zoe was the phos of all anthropos, of all mankind. Now why does that word anthropon matter? Because if we go back to Genesis, check this out. Genesis 2. Let me see if I can find the Septuagint. And I can find it's Genesis 3. Look at this. Watch this. Adam is the anthropos. He's the man, right? That's the man.
Adamus,
he's the first man. He's the anthropos. And it says, named his wife. Where is it? Eos, idiote, anthropon. Wait, is this not lined up correctly? Gain. Is this Cross Bible not lined up correctly? This is not the same verse at all. It's down here. It's not okay. I was going to say, so Cross Bible is not correctly lined up. It says, and Adam, here it is right here. So this verse 20 is actually 21.
Okay.
And Adam to onoma, name to Gunaikos, wife, names his wife, Autoi. Now, what do you think it says? You think it says Eve? Nope.
It says Zoe?
Zoe.
Oh my God.
Zoe is, look at, and it says hoti meter manton ton zotain, mother of all living. She's the mother of all living. So there's a triad in Genesis: God, Adam, and Adam makes Eve from himself, which is Zoe. So all John 1 is doing is it's retelling Genesis through this triad of God, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Zoe.
That's amazing.
So this is, I said all that to say this. You mentioned that Dionysus is this life aspect, the life of all things, the mother of all life, the actual growing of crops, the swelling of fruits, life itself. You have Nous, which is Zeus, the mind of the cosmos. You have the life-giving aspect, which is Dionysus. And then the spirit that's in all of us, which is the Dionysian spirit, like the spirit, the actual consciousness itself. That's a triad. That is the Trinity of Christianity right there.
Totally. I can get down with that. I can get down with that definition of God, by the way. I love that.
Yeah.
And I do see an Indo-European thread that runs through this Trinity idea. I mean, you see it obscurely. You see it in the Scythian religion with Tabiti, Papas,
Tabiti.
and Api.
Papaios. And by the way, Papaios is identified with Christ in the Nicene hymn.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously in the Trimurti, you see it there. You see it in you just see it all over the Indo-European world, and I just think, that Christianity. I wonder if Christianity is carrying forward an Indo-European tradition in a way that isn't like popularly accepted. We want to say that Christianity carries on a Jewish path, and it does. You can't say it doesn't, but I think it also carries an Indo-European tradition that's just unrecognized.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's definitely going through. I think it's half Greek, half Jewish.
Totally.
So,
all right, man. Listen, I appreciate it. You've given me so much of your time, man, and I'm super grateful. In order to try to wind this down in a way that makes any kind of semblance of sense, I'm going to ask you a softball question, maybe. Last question for Neal, the bringer of Gnosis. Do you have a favorite myth?
Favorite myth? That's a good question. I never thought about a favorite myth. I mean, where would I go with that? That's an interesting question. I want to answer this. I don't want to say nothing. I know I have some on top of my list.
It's like asking what your favorite song is or your favorite movie.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? The Homeric hymn to Demeter is fascinating to me. There's just so much esoteric symbolism going on. You have, that I would probably go with that, the Homeric hymn to Demeter, because it's so central to the Eleusinian mysteries. Or I might go with, let's see. Let me take a look at this. Let me see if I can get some ideas over here. I mean, you got the Bacchae, obviously, from Euripides. You have Ovid's Metamorphosis. I got to go with that. There we go. Ovid's Metamorphosis.
That was the only poetry that I ever read, like in long form. I didn't read the whole thing, but I read long passages of it because I did an episode on the flood narrative, and I was bouncing around, and I read a whole big chunk of Ovid, which is just a little bit embarrassing, man. Like I'm reading poetry.
Ovid is one of the best. He's one of the best. It's
totally.
Ovid's Metamorphosis is taking all the myths that were prominent in the Roman Empire, whether it's Greek, Etruscan, Roman, and just kind of putting them into one story, one giant bibliotheca of all the myths in order from the genesis of the world and the stories of Zeus and Prometheus all the way down to Caesar Augustus. That's what he ends. The conclusion of Ovid's Metamorphosis is that Caesar Augustus is the product of all this. All the gods and everything they've been doing has been leading up to Caesar Augustus, the savior of mankind. So he's also right before Caesar Augustus, Pythagoras gets his due. He gets his own little story in there too.
Oh, Pythagoras?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the pre-Socratics, man.
Me too.
Empedocles and Heraclitus and all those guys.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Neal, listen, man, you've been with me for almost 2.5 hours. I just want to say thank you again. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a freaking blast, and maybe we can do it again. Be happy to. And thanks otherwise, absolutely. I just want to hang in with. I'm going to play the outro music. Hang in with me for just a minute longer, but I want to steal your phrase for a second. You have just attained true gnosis.
Nice.
Well, there you have it. That's one avenue explored.